Can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Brad Dittmar. I'm a physical educator. I've taught in St. Louis metropolitan area for over a decade, and I'm currently the PE teacher at Cattell Elementary in Des Moines.
Do you feel racial discrimination is an issue in education? Why or why not?
I think racial discrimination is probably an issue in education. I think maybe sometimes it gets blown out of proportion. I think everybody has biases, and that probably affects the way people deal with each other in the classroom or in schools in general.
Do teachers play a role in defending the students against racial discrimination?
I believe so, correct, yes.
What's the parent's role within defending the student or being the parent of the student that is doing the discrimination?
Well, I think teachers and parents both have an obligation to teach kids to appreciate and respect other people's differences and learn to get along with one another. So depending on the situation, I think both of those people have a role in teaching their kids how to treat others with respect.
Have you dealt with any racial discrimination within your classroom and with your students?
Depending on your definition of discrimination, I would think it'd be better to say I've dealt with a lot of conflict between different races of students. Again, I don't know how discrimination is defined, but I think a lot of students have had issues with one another just based on race only. But I'm not sure if they discriminate or withhold opportunities or are out to get anybody, so to speak, because of race. I just think it's a source of conflict.
So do you believe certain students, because of their race, have certain advantages or disadvantages within the classroom?
I wouldn't necessarily say that's the case. I would say my experience has been maybe some kids are at a disadvantage more because of their socioeconomic status as opposed to their race.
How have you dealt with racial discrimination and or conflict within your classroom?
Well, I've always worked with younger age kids, ages kindergarten through 5th grade, so I'm not sure most of the time the kids that I deal with are even considered with a race, so to speak, but it's more about they just have differences and they don't know how to address it. So I just try to teach the kids how to respect one another, and try to accept other people's differences if that does come up at any time during class.
Can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
My name is Nate Smith. I've been in education for approximately 20 years. I've taught at smaller rural districts early on in the early 2000s. Spent 10 years at Southeast Polk High School, and I'm currently at Ankeny Northview, a feeder for Centennial, and I've been there for approximately 5 years.
Do you do anything else besides teaching?
Other than the phys ed and health classroom, I've taught driver education for a number of years, along with coaching track and field.
Do you feel there's an issue with racial discrimination within education?
I don't think there's an issue with racial discrimination behind the philosophy of a good, sound educational process that our public schools have. There may be some issues probably within some of the social settings surrounding education, but with what everyone's trying to do, putting the students first and learning first, I don't see it being an issue in the districts that I've been at.
So more social stereotypes versus discrimination?
Yeah, I would say it would be more along the lines of the current happenings in the world and in social media tend to hype things up just a little bit. But I would say overall, with the quality educators that we have here in the state of Iowa, and with their philosophy on making sure that every student learns and at the appropriate rate, and with all of the support that we have at the school, I don't feel it's an issue.
Now, what is the teacher's role in defending a student that is facing racial discrimination?
This would be a great opportunity to, number one, to identify that there is an issue and to educate everybody involved. And this goes into the target, the person who's actually targeting that person there, along with the parents as well. So you're talking, there is a large number of stakeholders that could be involved here, not only the teachers, the students, the parents, but administrators and counselors as well.
Okay. What is the role of the parents themselves, either being the parent of the perpetrator or the one that's receiving the racial discrimination?
Well, regardless, all parties need to be notified immediately, and they need to be brought in. It needs to be something communicated not through email or on phone, something that needs to become in face to face, and to be able to clarify the situation, put all the facts on the table on what actually happened and occurred, and make sure they're not jumping to conclusions, making sure all the context is there in front of both parties, of the parents as well, and just to make sure that this is a teaching opportunity, to understand exactly what's occurring and what's happening and why.
Within your teaching experience, have you had to deal with any racial discrimination among your students?
I would say early on in the rural settings, there wasn't much racial diversity in the districts in which I had taught in. Now, obviously, with the larger district that I'm in here, we're a little bit more diverse, and I think we need to really kind of look at inclusion. Our school district does a wonderful job of focusing on inclusion and making sure that each student is connected with other students and staff members in the building. At least one member of the staff has to make just simple connection to a student. And we get a number of students that move in within the year. And again, with the counselors and the administration and some other committees, with those people's helps, we make sure that everyone at least finds a role in the district where we're at. A lot of racial discrimination. I haven't dealt with it as much. Probably, I would say so.
Can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, I am Kayla. I graduated from Bondurant Farrar, went and studied at DMAC for 2 years, and then now I'm at Grandview.
Okay, so what do you feel is the biggest challenge that racial students face in the classroom?
I'm not certain, but I would imagine that teachers probably don't push them to their full potential.
Okay, so do you think strictly because of their race, the teachers may be biased of their capabilities or incapabilities within the classroom?
Yes, some teachers.
Okay, what is the biggest impact that a student of white descent can have on a student of color?
I feel like the biggest impact could be just treating each other equally and not making it seem like they're different at all.
So do you feel students that are white in color are mistreating students of color within the classroom?
Yes, I feel like that can happen, but it just depends on grade wise. Elementary, I don't think that would happen as much as high school would.
Do you feel that students of color face a harder road when it comes to their education?
I feel like students of color can face a harder road. It just depends on what level of education you're talking about. If a student of color, if their family struggles, then yes, I can imagine it'd be very difficult for them to get into a university or a college if they're not having academic scholarships.
So would you say that it doesn't matter racially, but more of a social economic standpoint? So if they are well-to-do, they have a strong advantage of being dominant in the education field.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then those that struggle financially will have a hardship within the education.
Yeah.
Do you feel that white students ever face any sort of discrimination within education? For example, if the white population of students is the minority of the school district versus people of color being the minority?
I feel like that they could, it'd be the same way as it would be if the school was full of white people.
Do you feel that those doing discriminatory actions would be more along the students or the educators?
Well, it depends. I know someone that went to a school and observed, and the teacher said that he gave up on the students a long time ago because of their race, and so I think it could be both.
All right, final question. Do you feel there's a discriminatory issue within the education system?
Yes.
And as a future teacher, what is the biggest responsibility that I have and teachers in general have to combat that issue?
I feel like every teacher needs to push students to their full potential and treat them all equally. It doesn't matter their race or their gender. And for those students that are struggling or aren't putting effort into it, I believe that teachers should expect them to give their full potential and push them to their full potential. But of course, there's only so much a teacher can do.